Ever wonder why there are no pregnant tributes in the Hunger Games? I did too.
If it weren't for the baby.
Let's find out more.
Based on the Capitol crowd's uproar over Katniss's fake pregnancy in the Quarter Quell, a pregnant tribute is a first, or something rare that's happened so long ago that it's been forgotten and likely purposely erased from Panem history. There's a lot of questions about pregnant tributes. Where are they? What would happen if a tribute was visibly pregnant? Does the Capitol terminate these pregnancies or do something to prevent them from happening altogether? Let's break down the most logical, canon-compliant explanation. This is all based on the book canon of the Hunger Games series. What I see as the simplest, most likely explanation of what the Capitol does with pregnant tributes is that there are no pregnant tributes, because children of reaping age are on various forms of contraception. Since Panem is in the future, we can get creative with the technology that exists, but I imagine some sort of long-term contraceptive shots given to girls and boys, and the type of shot would vary by gender, age, and puberty status. Or they get some sort of implant like an IUD and something for the boys too that is tiny and undetectable to kids. I'm saying undetectable for this implant thing because if Katniss had that, I believe it would have been addressed in the text. Contraceptive injections already exist, so I think Panem could have created very sophisticated meds that last years and/or injectable implants they can control remotely to regulate hormones. Then, once kids age out of the reaping pool, which is ages 12 to 18, they stop getting the contraceptive shots. And these could be administered to citizens without their knowledge. Some older kids and adults might guess there's some pregnancy prevention happening, but the Capitol doesn't care about informed consent and likes to withhold information from its people. If teenagers were getting busy, and I'm sure plenty of them were, the slag heap in District 12 is a popular hookup location according to Gale. The word slag, I can't. Teens could just think they were good at being safe or that they weren't very fertile due to malnutrition. And malnutrition is a whole other aspect of this that would help naturally reduce the risk of unplanned pregnancies. Puberty would be delayed for many kids in the poorer districts, and many women would have irregular menstrual cycles and miscarriages due to malnutrition. I doubt the district schools gave an in-depth education about where babies came from, but parents would hopefully fill in the gaps, and especially in districts with livestock, people needed to learn about reproduction. Even though there's limited medical care in the districts, the Capitol still needs enough people to be alive and physically able to provide labor, which means they would need to prevent diseases from running rampant. And I imagine they would do this through vaccinations. My theory is that district folks all received regular vaccinations for a variety of diseases, polio, measles, and whatever other illnesses popped up. District 13 even had some sort of pox epidemic that killed a bunch of them and left a lot more infertile. It was a really big issue. 13 had advanced technology and medical care, but diseases are always mutating, and their existing vaccines and treatments weren't equipped for this new pox strain. Epidemics could and likely did happen all over Panem. We also know there was a rabies issue in the Capitol during the First War. My theory is that when everyone is getting their routine vaccinations, the tribute-aged kids were also injected with contraceptives. There had to have been a census to keep track of all the reaping-aged children and for general civilian surveillance, so the vaccinations could be part of that census system. We're not given specific information in the books about a census, but its existence is implied. I know in the first movie, when kids show up to the reaping, they're given a quick blood test to verify their identity, but there's nothing like that in the books. Here's a tiny bit of info about the reaping that Katniss gave in Chapter 1 of the Hunger Games. Attendance is mandatory unless you are on death's door. This evening, officials will come around and check to see if this is the case. If not, you'll be imprisoned. So you can only miss the reaping, at least in District 12, if you are literally about to die. Peacekeepers know which people are missing at the reaping because people file in silently and sign in. So if you don't sign in, you must be put on a list and officers come to verify the legality of your absence. The reaping is a good opportunity for the Capitol to keep tabs on the population as well. 12 through 18-year-olds are herded into roped areas marked off by ages. The oldest in the front, the young ones, like Prim, toward the back. Everyone goes to the reaping, or a public viewing area for it if there's not room in the town square. It's not just the eligible kids, it's everyone. And there are definitely more ways the population is tracked. Marriage certificates, school attendance, tesserae signups, and I'm sure there's more. I've seen the question raised of, why don't people try to hide their kids from the government? And the answer to that is, it's virtually impossible because Panem is a surveillance state. Big Brother is always watching via bugging, cameras, peacekeepers, informants, etc. Even if a woman was able to hide inside her house during her pregnancy and keep her baby hidden in a closet, she would get caught eventually. And the punishment for doing such a thing would be incredibly severe, probably execution or being made into an AVOX, and everyone involved and anyone who could have aided in hiding them would be punished too. That's what I believe. Plus, if we follow this regular vaccination theory, people's bodies are being monitored. I imagine there's mandatory vaccination days in the town square or at school where everyone also has a bit of blood drawn for DNA verification, pregnancy testing, and other data collection. The Capitol can see who is pregnant, and that person would be surveilled to see if they carried that baby to term. All this surveillance stuff goes so deep, it's overwhelming to think about. This high level of surveillance and the availability of vaccinations and contraceptives wouldn't always have existed in Panem. At the dawn of the Hunger Games, the country was in disrepair, and it took many years to recover. I imagine building up surveillance mechanisms happened much sooner than any contraceptive shot administration. War already required surveillance, and beefing up forces of peacekeepers in every district needed to be a priority in order to control the newly conquered rebels. When the rules and regulations about the games and the reapings were created and distributed to the district leaders, there had to have been a procedure to manage pregnant tributes in the most likely decades before a medical contraceptive plan would be up and running. And this pregnancy plan could have been happened down the line. Maybe they weren't prepared for it initially, and then something happened and they needed to make a plan. Here's the gist of what I imagine this plan to be. Kids and their parents must be scared into submission to minimize the amount of teen pregnancies. Anyone 18 and under who is pregnant and the person who got them pregnant must be executed or made into an AVOX depending on labor needs. Terminating the pregnancy would be an ineffective punishment and waste of medical resources in the Capitol's eyes. The families of the pregnant couple would also be severely punished. Something along those lines. Katniss doesn't mention any law like this, so I don't think it officially existed, but the threat of consequences and examples of people being punished for this would suffice. It's also very possible only the pregnant girl and her family would be punished, which would reflect our own world where people like to forget that fathers are equally responsible for generating a pregnancy. Though Panem treats everyone horribly, regardless of gender, so who knows? I imagine authorities would do their best to track and identify any underage pregnancies, but it's inevitable some would slip through the cracks before the medical contraceptive shot plan. In the case that a female tribute is pregnant, here's what I imagine is the procedure. First, I'll focus on the tributes who are not visibly pregnant. All female tributes would be given pregnancy tests. This could be done covertly on the train by collecting what they leave in the toilet, or done at some point during their beauty prep at the Capitol, a quick blood draw during the chaotic waxings. If the tribute is pregnant, it could be handled in a couple ways. Either it's ignored and the game makers let them go into the arena that way and ensure it's never publicized, or the tribute is given some type of termination procedure. I'm sorry for skirting around the actual A word. I'm just trying to avoid upsetting Big Brother algorithm with something as controversial as basic human rights. It's very possible the no longer pregnant tribute isn't even told they had a procedure depending on how far along they were. They may not have known they were pregnant yet. They could be lied to about whatever medication they're giving or a procedure they're having. With Panem's future technology, they could do procedures with no noticeable side effects, or it could be done when someone's asleep in the training center, or some other horrific violation of bodily autonomy. I think if the Capitol believed the tribute knew they were pregnant, they would tell them what was happening and that they were going to be punished for it in the arena. The tribute would be threatened that if they disclosed their pregnancy to anyone, especially in the interview, they would get a special kind of vicious ending in the games and their families would be executed. Something like that. Or, of course, the game makers could do nothing about their pregnancy and just give them the threat about not telling anyone. A pregnant tribute would either die in the games, or if they did win, they likely would have miscarried due to the physical trauma they endured. Or if they won and they didn't miscarry, the Capitol could give them a procedure possibly during their hovercraft ride away from the arena. Now on to what happens if a tribute is visibly pregnant at the reaping during the pre-contraceptive shot era. First of all, there's no way footage of a teenage girl ascending the stage at the reaping with a big baby bump would make it on air. I believe the instructions would unfortunately be to execute them on site and then pick another girl's name out of the reaping bowl. Easy peasy, and it makes the pregnant girl into a terrifying cautionary tale for everyone in the district. The father-to-be would likely identify himself in the chaos of that execution and be apprehended also. Not that he would just step forward and announce that he's the father, but he may be driven by his emotions to defend his partner, cry over her body, fight the peacekeepers, etc. And then maybe their families would be punished too. If a visibly pregnant girl's name was drawn at the reaping, there's no room to mercifully turn her away and pick someone else. The Capitol cannot allow pregnancy to be a get out of games free card, because then girls could just purposely get pregnant to escape the reaping. I'm not saying that's a good situation for them either. I mean, being forced by circumstances to make that sort of decision is awful, and I'm sure the maternal mortality rate wasn't great either. Tribute's hormones are possibly manipulated during the Hunger Games. Katniss notes, not one of the boys grew a beard, and many were old enough to. I wonder what they did to them. I believe something was done to manipulate their hormones to stop facial hair growth during their time in the games. Or maybe it was waxing or a laser hair removal treatment sort of thing, but I'm going with the hormone theory here. I imagine it wasn't just their facial hair that stopped growing, but the hair on their heads too. The games could last weeks, and if someone has really short hair, the growth is apparent. This beard growth suspension is partly done for aesthetic reasons since it makes the boys look younger. They're playing a game for kids after all, according to the Capitol at least. And it's helpful for editing the game's footage. In the edited recaps, game makers may want to tell a story in a different order than what actually happened to fit a narrative. And hair length disrupts continuity. Think about the gold cups on Love is Blind. You're not able to see how much liquid is in each cup because then they can't show a conversation completely out of order to fit a narrative. Male and female tributes alike could be given medication to control their hair growth, and I think it's likely menstrual cycles were also controlled. There's contraceptives even in our world that temporarily stop someone's cycle. The Capitol wouldn't be trying to help girls out by doing this. It would mainly be for aesthetic purposes. I'm sure they edit out the tributes going to the bathroom since it's not appealing to watch that. And sure, they could do that for girls on their cycle when they need to clean themselves up and use whatever they could find as a pad. But just having them not have a period is something the Capitol could easily do instead. And it gets rid of the possibility of non-violence related red stains on their pants. The standard for what is seen as acceptable versus gross is so wild. Capitolites would be fine seeing a child get their eye gouged out, but a period stain? Way too yucky. Being on your period during the Hunger Games would really suck though, and even just having bad PMS would put someone at a disadvantage. It's also very likely tributes would have irregular periods from malnutrition to begin with, and the stress of being in the games could prevent someone from having a period too. When Katniss is believed to be pregnant in the 75th games, it's a humongous deal. She's implied to be the only pregnant tribute in the collective memory of the people of Panem. We know the Capitol can alter history via propaganda and censorship, but at least in recent Panem history, there have not been any publicly known pregnant tributes. The Quarter Quell was an anomaly since it's the only games to include people over the age of 18. Plus, since the tributes were all victors, their bodies are probably even more closely monitored than the general population, especially if you're someone like Finnick whose body is sold. I imagine Finnick and any other victors that were in that situation were given medication to prevent pregnancies and spreading diseases. I wouldn't be surprised at all if in preparation for the Victor Quell, all the female tributes were being monitored for pregnancy. There were victors who were married and had kids already, like Cecilia from District 8. Within the fandom, the Victor Quell reapings are widely believed to be completely rigged, that the Capitol picked which victors they most wanted to punish. I think they would also factor in the volunteering variable, doing their best to predict how victors' relationships and personalities would impact things. You cannot tell me that Peeta's name was actually in that reaping bowl for the Quarter Quell, because the Capitol knew Haymitch would volunteer for him and that Peeta would volunteer for Haymitch. The Capitol even had confirmation of their volunteering plan since Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch all talked about it in their bugged houses in Victor's Village. So I firmly believe Haymitch's name was written on both pieces of paper in that bowl because the Capitol wanted Peeta in the games and knew he'd volunteer. That's my headcanon and I'm sticking to it. But the Capitol didn't anticipate Peeta's baby bomb move. Peeta outsmarted them. He's just that girl. My girl. Our girl. My son. I love Peeta. Peeta's motivation for saying Katniss was pregnant was mainly as a way to aid the rebellion by highlighting the Capitol's cruelty and a Hail Mary to get sympathetic sponsors for Katniss. I think he had a tiny hope it would stop the games, but he and Katniss were both smart enough to know that wouldn't actually happen. They knew they were screwed. I know some people wonder why Snow didn't just give Katniss a pregnancy test after the interview to prove it was a lie, but it didn't matter if she was actually pregnant at that point. The damage was done. I'm confident the Capitol officials already knew for a fact Katniss wasn't pregnant. She was target number one for the Quell. They were watching her every move. And I bet they knew everything that had happened physically between Katniss and Peeta and knew none of the cuddling they did would have gotten her pregnant. Sure, there were rumors that they were getting busy on the train, but there's actual cameras and microphones in the rooms, so anyone with surveillance access would know what happened. The Capitol would look foolish and inept if after the interview, Caesar did a special news report where he reveals Peeta and Katniss lied about the pregnancy. It would just become a he said, she said thing, and people would be split on who to believe. It would make the Capitol look weak to go on the defensive like this, flailing to justify the games. It'd be like the Capitol was admitting that they have so little power over these victors that they'll get on the mic and make their own propaganda right in the Capitol's face. Also, plenty of people likely didn't believe Katniss was actually pregnant. The point isn't that she's pregnant, it's that she could be. That all the tributes that die every year could have lived on, had a whole life, and even created more life, and come from families themselves. The baby bomb made Capitol loyalists confront the truth that the games are about killing innocent children, which is cruel and wrong. They're fending off a lifetime of propaganda that tells them otherwise. Widespread outrage and negativity about the games in the Capitol is majorly valuable to the rebel cause. Reminder, the interviews do air live and everyone, at least in the districts, is required to watch them. So people saw this, it's just the recap of the interviews that was canceled since the whole show was too rebellious to be salvaged. Katniss was only 17 at the time of the quell, but once you're a victor, you're treated as an adult. Victors stop going to school, they are given an entire house, they have a steady stream of income via their prize money, and the only job they have to do is about a month of mentoring every year. There isn't any direct information in the text saying victors can't go to school anymore, so maybe they can go if they would like to, but it doesn't seem to be the norm. The main purpose of schools in the districts are to pump kids full of propaganda and prepare them for the workforce. Outside of basic reading and math, kids are taught about the trade of their district. Katniss learned about mining coal, whereas District 11 kids learned about agriculture. Since Katniss wouldn't be working in the mining industry, then there's no reason to send her to school. And a victor doesn't really need propaganda to control them, since being a victor is its own special hell. It's weird to think that a young victor just stops going to formal schooling. Finnick was only 14 when he won, so he has an 8th grade education by American standards. Anyways, Katniss was seen by the Capitol as an adult by the time of the quell. She was about to get married, and even though she's an adult, it's still horrifying to the Capitol crowd when they hear she is pregnant. Yes, they care more about Katniss than a standard tribute because of her fame, but the root of their unrest is the hypocritical ideology of an unborn baby being more precious than the 23 kids that die in the arena every year. It serves as a great commentary on reproductive rights in the real world. The Capitolites have been conditioned to be fine watching kids aged 12 to 18 go into the slaughter on their television, but an unborn baby going into the arena is too far, even for them. It falls outside of their government-crafted window of tolerance for bloodshed. It's a disaster for Snow, drawing even more sympathy to the star-crossed lovers, and making the quell theme even more unpopular. Sympathy for a pregnant tribute is bad for the Capitol regime, so along the way, they had to have figured out a way to prevent this from happening altogether. The Capitol does not care about the life of the pregnant tribute and their unborn child, but they care about the effectiveness of their child death pageant. A pregnant tribute ruins the show and makes it harder for Capitolites to forget the tributes are real people, just like them. So tribute pregnancies needed to be erased from history and eradicated. Do you agree with my theory about the contraceptive shots? What are your ideas about how pregnant tributes were managed? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more Hunger Games analysis and do the thumbs up thing.